Shades of women. When I first thought of this particular discussion, I thought about my mom. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about my great-grandmother. And I would not be the man I am today if it wasn't for all the extraordinary women in my life. You see, I didn't grow up in a patriarchal family. I grew up in a matriarchal family. So the women in my life were always the center and the backbone of our family. They still are. And so in my life, I've never had, even all the women who actually guided me in my life, gave me opportunities. Most of my opportunities came from women. So it's just a no-brainer for me to respect and also to recognize all the incredible women in society. I didn't grow up in a society where women were not treated as equal. Women were always respected within my community and my family. So this panel today is something that I wish and I hope we can continue to have it outside of Women's History Month as well. And it will continue to go on. Because women need to be recognized and her story needs to be told. Her story needs to be told. And that's the reason why I think, I'm really thankful that Mirna, you're here today, and the incredible panelists that you're going to hear from. But I picked two extraordinary men to shed light on their experience with their moms and their family as well before we begin our discussion this evening. So Marco Ferbetti, it's an honor to have him here. He has an organization called Stop the Lie. Stop the lie. Stop the myths. Stop the negativity. All that. And he's a very positive individual who's here in New London County, who's spreading love, who's spreading positive energy throughout our county. So let's give him a round of applause.
Just give me a moment here to get set up, if you don't mind. We're going to do this thing called unique poetry is what I call it. It's not rap, it's not poetry, it's not slam poetry. It's Marco writing about his life, and it's unique. So we like to call it unique poetry. And Kevin was fortunate. I was fortunate enough to be honored to stand up here and actually write the first poem at 34 years old about my mom. So this is something special for me, and I'm grateful. This is just for her. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Dear Mom, I don't know exactly what to write on this page. There is about 34 years and some change of things I can say, but you gave me life. Whether you decided to or not in that moment, I was born by you and I was created by God. And I thank him that you did it right. Though you weren't perfect or fully mature in your faith, I know, but every year I got older, you also continued to grow. And as time would go on, you got closer to your heavenly Father, even though your biological was gone. You see, you never let the adversities of life stop your steps. You always progressed and rarely had it easy. Since you conceived me, I never even seen you break a sweat. You are a superhero to me, and I'm super glad I wrote this so that you can hear it from me. You worked hard to provide for all my needs and to stay positive in tough times. You even taught me that truth to stop the lie so that one day I could follow my dreams. And I'm glad you set the example. You did it right, surely. Started a life, became a wife and a mother before me. You see, I was a second child, so I think that you had more experience and learned from my older sister. Like maybe she got slighted and I got the more mature you. But whether that's true or that's false, you learned from your flaws as the Lord matured you. And this lesson would carry on until today, in which I still wonder what my life would be like if I didn't have such a great mother. Like, if you didn't sacrifice everything so that I can have everything I wanted, would I have worked harder at my young age and became more accomplished? Like, is there a downplay to that? Did I prevent myself from becoming a better me? Like, do I now expect to be given everything? Or, what if I was never taught love and forgiveness? What if I had taken the hatred from this world, stored it in my heart, and became vicious? And What if you never got saved and gave me Jesus? You know, would I be this man I am today? Would I have found him on my own? Like, are all these things that I'm asking and saying true? Like, could I love a woman if I was neglected by one and I hated you? Like, would I give up on relationships at the times when they hurt? Would I just walk out every time I see they require work? So I commend you. And I am glad to set the example. You set that example for 38 years and stayed with Dad. And with so much negativity and destruction I caused on my own path, I'm grateful to say today, separated parents are not part of my past. And it won't be part of my future because now, me and my lady, we have a model to follow. So even if I didn't follow your example of faith and relationships right away, I always knew what to come back to whenever I went astray. And that to me is the most important thing. Even though I received some scars from it, the Bible says to train a child in the way they should go, and when they grow old, they will not depart from it. And even when I was far from it, I always was closer than I thought because God never left my side, and you stayed close to me through all my flaws. Because you went through addictions too. In addition to overcoming your own, you showed me it's never over as long as God's on the throne. And I had to move away to get clean and start living. And even though I would relapse just about every time I would come back home and visit, you still had hope. Although I know it broke your heart to the core, you found a way to still love me when your heart couldn't take anymore. Then you left all those shattered pieces at the feet of Jesus when your heart couldn't break anymore. And we know what he does. If you feel neglected, he loves. If you feel like you can't make it, he strengthens. If you went astray, he puts you right back in your place. If you feel like it isn't working, he will give you a purpose. If you got an addiction, well, he is the prescription. If you locked up in a cell, he got the key to your jail. And he sure is the difference between a fall or a fail. It's real. Because I don't know what's worse. Locked up by the state of CT, high bond, no surety, or locked up in my mind, afraid to be me, a prisoner of insecurity. So, dear Mom, you taught me how to walk into places with no experience and own it. To battle through pain and to rejoice in the rain, knowing that it won't drown me but grow me, even if it's slowly, but you gotta be planted and allow those roots to grow deep first. So all of my struggles were not in vain because that was God tilling up the soil of my heart, then planting me in all that dirt so that every time the storm came and it looked like it was getting worse, I would grow a little taller through the pain. You see, we all can benefit from the rain. You taught me values, and any time that I depreciated my worth with bad choices, you reminded me I was still valued. And that is the reason I am still standing. And that is the reason why I can stand in front of all my peers. I can stand in front of all my peers to remind them of the good mothers out there and to persevere even when their mom wasn't there. Because we only get one. And no matter their decision to stay or to leave, no matter their mistakes of wrongs or of rights, they gave us all life and God gave us all purpose. So take those two things and put them together and mix them with love and go out and be better. And be that man or woman that your parents couldn't learn from their mistakes. Hold on to their strengths and keep pushing. Because we are only here for a short time. And if you are looking for more time, say yes to God. Receive an earthly shine and eternal purpose that will never die. Because if you fall asleep, you will awake in paradise. Finally meet your creator. Streets of gold will leave you mesmerized. This world is dying, no lying. We all in need of a savior. So dear Mom, you gave me everything. I could never repay you. But I promise to live a life of integrity and respect, leaving a legacy, and I don't carry any regrets. Because I may have made you cry 1,000 times, and you may have asked God why like 1,000 times. But don't worry, we never have to go back to the old days. I know it was all worth it, and that you are happy because my soul's saved. So dear Mom, thank you.
Let's give Marco Ferbetti another round of applause. Dear Mom, that's right. The connection, a woman, the power that you have as a woman, the impact that you make on our lives. Thank you. Johnny Miller from Save One, please bless us with something. another poem.
So I just want to start off by saying that I wrote this an hour ago. Well, my bad. I just finished writing it 5 minutes ago. Started this about an hour ago on my drive here. You know, women have played a huge role in my life, so I wrote this specifically for the women in my life. To the women in my life, thank you. To the women right here, thank you. To the women all around, thank you. You see, I remember growing up living with both parents. They were constantly working, so every day I would go to my grandparents. You know, I used to call it Abuela school, due to the fact that I'm half Puerto Rican. You know, I would also learn things while I was at Abuela school. It wasn't easy. I'd fight with my sister, I'd cry and whine, but Abuela always had my back. She did her best to raise me while my parents were at work. She would always be there when I'd call to cry about my mom grounding me, or to call to ask her how to cook rice and beans. I thank you, Abuela, for playing a major role in my life. Mom, you know we've been through a lot, from the bullying at school where you intervene and help in any way you can. There were times I'd be upset at you for it, but every time you did it, you only did it to help, and to help me grow. Mom, you know we fought here and there, but after all, you've always loved me and had my back, so thank you. You see, women play a major role in everyone's life. From Abuela helping me while my parents were at work, to my mom helping me at school and at my social life. I've learned how to respect and love women by the women in my life that have raised me and taught me right. So thank you, women, from everywhere. Keep raising men and teaching men how to love. You know, the golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. The women in my life have taught me how to love. So women, keep teaching us how to love. So I like to say to all the women, thank you.
He said, women, keep teaching who? Keep teaching us how to love. That's right. So Johnny, when I was thinking about that, I kept thinking about my mom and my grandmother. And when they would always say to us, they would say, you know, to my brothers and sisters, make sure you always tell us before you walk out the door that you love us. And even every morning, even now, at 5 o'clock in the morning, I call my mom, I'll send her a text message if I can't get in contact with her, and I'll tell her I love her. Because I thank her for just all the sacrificing she did. Taking the city bus with 10 or 12 bags of groceries, walking down blocks to make sure we have food, and putting food in our house when we didn't have a car for years. I just always think about her staying up to 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, helping me work on my essay, making sure I can write well so I can move forward in my life. The sacrificing, the time, the energy. Thank you, all of you. Because it's people always want to put women in a box, and they're not monolithic. They're not all the same. And that's why this panel there's a need for this today. About a few years ago, there was a fact that was shared with me, a statistic, and they said that I think women still make 78 cents less than a man on a dollar. And I always wondered in my life, you know, why did my mom have to work 3 jobs? You know, and even though my dad was present, but she always had to work a lot. You know, and I was just always thinking like 2 shifts, and I would go, wow, until I got older. Until I went to college and I started to educate myself, then I learned the way the system is and how all the systematic oppression that women still go through. But how do we get past it? We have discussions like this so we can move forward. So I would love for my panel to come up here These extraordinary, let's give them a round of applause. And earlier I said I grew up in a family where, you know, it was a matriarchal community that I was in, that I was part of in my family, right? So I feel like it was my goal as a man to take a step back and ask a female to moderate this event. Because a lot of times we need to hear from women and their voices. So I want to say, Mirna Martinez, it's a pleasure and honor to have you here this evening to moderate this event. Thank you very much.
Kevin, thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here with all of you, and so I think first what makes most sense is to please introduce yourselves. If we can start with Luisana and move this way. If you'd introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your background, what you're doing, what's that other stuff that you do?
Do you want me to stand up or just?
Oh, just you can say right there. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Luisana Cabrera. I am originally from New York City, but have been living in New London, Connecticut for over 11, 12 years now. I attended T. Grosso Tech, where I graduated in 2012, and then went on to get my bachelor's in business management with a concentration in entrepreneurship at the University of Connecticut. I now work at Higher Edge in New London, and I am the Success Program Director, so I work helping low-income and first-generation students get to and through college.
Thank you. Thank you, Luisana. Ashley, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley Shaw Giordano. I don't have a full background, but I graduated high school in 2011 from Ledyard. I didn't attend college. I lost my way, went down the wrong path through drug addiction, and through that, I've been in recovery for almost 3 years, and I work with Community Speaks Out, who meets here every month, and I do as much as I can for the community to raise awareness, educate, and prevent and help people into recovery. So.
Thank you very much. Lee?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lee Cornish Muller. I am from New London, and I graduated from college out in California. I've been back in New London now for 20 years. I am a senior program manager at Electric Boat in information technology. I also serve on the board of directors for Isaac School. I serve as president of the board for 7th Regiment Drum and Bugle Corps. And I participate in events like this as much as I can to share my story and put the word out there. So thank you for having me, Kevin.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Chris?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Raitt. I'm originally a native of Southern Oregon, but have been living in New London, Connecticut for about 15 years. For most of that time, I have been an educator, many years for Safe Futures, teaching violence prevention, healthy dating relationship programs in elementary, middle, and high schools. And now I'm still educating students, but also educating staff in how to better work with students, how to change the cultures of their school, but also both in and outside of schools, how can we use restorative practices to restore harm when done and strengthen relationships to make all of our communities stronger.
Thank
Happy
you.
to be here.
I feel like this is low. Is that okay? Is that better? Or it's me, or I'm tall, either one, I don't know. So, you know, I had some questions written out, and then this morning as I was scrolling through the briefing of the news, I heard a story of, I don't know if anyone here heard it, of some teen boys who had rated their female classmates, you know, I think it was anywhere between a 5 and a 10, depending on their looks. And the female classmates took it upon themselves to gather and approach the administration and begin awareness, educational of what it means to be objectified, to not want to, they didn't want to be in a classroom and think about when they're getting up that someone's looking at, their peers are looking at them to judge them, to seeing them as objects. And I wanted to know what any of these panelists, and well, you know, I'm going to back up. I'm sorry. I'm going to say that we're going to play this a little bit by ear, and that I'm going to ask questions. But please feel free at any point to jump in and say, "Hey, this reminds me of this," or "Let's back up on something." I really think that this should be as much as a conversation as possible. So anyway, but per that story, I wanted to know if that how that felt in relation to your own experiences at school or in whatever experience, and do you feel like that is does it feel completely foreign to like take the charge like that, or is it really something that we're moving into? How does that relate to, you know, we've got somewhat of different age groups here. So I just want to know, how does it feel to you, that story, in accordance to your own experiences? And we can, whoever would like to start. Ashley?
Yeah, I experienced that in high school, actually, and I know a group of girls did, being objectified like that. And we didn't have like a powerful movement like these girls did and you know, do something about it. I know personally, I internalized it. I took it personally. But I actually experienced that in the last job I had. My boss was objectifying, being sexist, and it sounds mean, but a coworker who might not be seen as attractive as other people who were working there was treated very poorly, and it's actually why I left the job. So it's still happening, but I see me taking more action in it as opposed to in the past. So it's really good to hear that teenage girls are doing that now because they need to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I'd just like to say it hurts to hear that, because you see so many things going on, not just like women or like female students being objectified in school, but how it affects others. My brother goes to Parkland, which is where the shooting happened at Stoneman Douglas. He's a student there. And so 17 of his classmates, sorry, I didn't know it was gonna go there. 17 of his classmates passed away because of that. And it was a student that was a Parkland student in the past who was bullied. So whether female or male, I think it just hurts. And when I was in school, sometimes I would see it happen, and I feel like, well, no one did anything about it. Then we kind of just ignored it. And I feel like that's kind of what society is doing. Like, we hear about these shootings and we hear about these bullying cases, and we kind of like, okay, it's sad, and then we move on. So I'm glad to hear that more people are stepping up and trying to do something about it.
Thank you, Luisana.
Sure.
I think I want to bring a generational twist to this, because I came up at a time when you just never said anything about it. You internalized it because, you know, we were taught in a way to listen but not speak, and speak when spoken to. And, you know, you could speak to your friends and your brothers and your sisters and your cousins, but even at school, it was kind of, you know, you either closed your mouth or you closed your eyes. And even though it was internal and emotional to either see it happen, I had a very good friend in high school, and I have to say that I went to a high school that was primarily a white school. I was one of 3 African Americans in my class, well, actually 4. And so I watched one of my very close friends, who was, I believe, abused at home, but also in school because of how she looked, suffer through that. But we stayed friends, but we never did anything about it because we weren't taught to do that. Women today are taught to stand up for themselves, speak loud, don't hold it in. But I'm talking more than 40 years ago when we didn't do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm proud to know that this is what women are doing today, young women are doing today. I'm proud of that, and I say that because what happened to that young woman in high school. 20 years later, I saw her. I'd moved away, and I came back, and I was driving down the street, and I saw her standing on the corner. And she was filled with drugs. She was a prostitute. And I asked her to come with me. You know, come just get in the car, and I'll take you somewhere. And she said, no, 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 no. And she passed away probably a year later. And it was very traumatic for me to know that this started 30 years before because she didn't feel she could speak out. And I almost felt ashamed that I didn't speak out for her at that time, but I didn't know that until 30 years later. So this is, you know, when I see this happening, and now I have, you know, a daughter and a granddaughter, and I'm teaching her, talk about it, say things, and be out there speaking for yourself. Don't hide this. Put it out there. And I think it's very, very important right now, especially for young girls, to learn it from this little, that it's okay. Not to tell them, no, you don't speak, you don't say that. No, say it. You don't have to say it in a mean way or a fresh way, but you need to be able to express yourself so that you can protect yourself as you grow.
Ooh, I think we need a breath, right?
Yeah, I
Thank
mean, I'll
you,
chime in. And I definitely take I find a lot of hope in the Me Too movement, and the ways in which women and men and people of all gender identities are finding their voices. And yet I also think, as much as things are changing, I think about the benign messages, like the small ways in which we still promote objectification and gendered messages at a really young age. Whether it's like the cute little onesie or t-shirt that we might give our baby boy that says like ladies man, or the ways in which we compliment little girls on their looks so much more than we compliment them on their brains. The ways in which a little boy chasing a little girl around a playground, you know, people might say is cute, and look, he found his girlfriend already. And yet the fact that she's running away, you know, do we intervene to say like, it seems like she's communicating some boundaries right now, are you listening? So I think there are like really small ways in which we still have a lot of work to do culturally to make sure that we're supporting boys and girls to express their boundaries, and make sure that we don't inadvertently reinforce this idea that like what makes a man is like women and as many as they can get, and that what makes a girl is being praised for her looks by men. So I think we have a lot of work to do, but I'm like very, very inspired by where our country is currently.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know you all said so much. It's kind of crazy to think that was question one, right? And the other thing is, I didn't give you the questions in advance because I thought, oh, that way we'll see, depending on the responses, what we connect to. And unfortunately, though, when you were talking, I was like, oh, that connects to this one, and it connects to this one, and it connects to this one. This is all part of one big conversation that needs to be had, as you all spoke of the internalization, instead of keeping it inside and thinking that it must be me. It must be because of who I am, the way that I am, recognizing the patterns and what's out there. So like I said, there's so many places to go. But one of the connections there is, I saw the quote that women struggle with self-promotion. And I wondered, is it true? Are we socialized to be less promotive, and how does this affect us professionally? Yes. Tell us about it.
I think I can relate this from my own personal experiences because I grew up as an only girl and an all boy, and the rest were boys. 2 athletes and 1 mathlete. And they were so loud in what they did as athletes and as mathletes that I became the quiet one, and I was always quiet. And they weren't so much praised more, but I always felt like I had to live up to that as the girl in the family. And you know, instead of us just being, and it wasn't as if my mother, I grew up, my mother was divorced when I was very young, so she raised us on her own. And I learned a lot from that. We can go there later, but from being in a family like that, you carry that into your life. And I'll give you an example. So I'm a young girl growing up in a family where the boys were very scholarships to college and, you know, in the newspaper. And I wasn't. So I carried that with me throughout my life, even so far as to be maybe less than 10 years ago, where people in my life didn't realize what I did for my life, in my career, and that I had transcended and broke a few glass ceilings. But I never talked about it, you know, because it wasn't expected of me. And I still don't. I still don't say much about what I do and how far I came in my career and how far I've come in my social life, even, you know, and my circles of people that I'm with. I don't talk about it. And I think that stems back from being a young girl in a family where I was quiet because everyone else was loud. So, you know, that's, I think I understood your question
Thank you.
in that way.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah. For me, growing up, I never really used my voice, I feel like. I had a lot of trauma things happen when I was younger, and I actually talked to my family about it recently. And I would say, like, when did you see me cry about that? Or when did I talk to you about that? And the answer was maybe a couple times or never. And I remember being upset every single night, crying every single night, alone in my room every single night. And so I never used my voice. And when I went through my addiction, I certainly was not using my voice at that time. The shame and the guilt and the pattern, the family pattern I was following that I told myself I would never do, I did not use my voice at all. And when I got into my first rehab, I couldn't speak. I was afraid of the group of people. There was 20 people, probably even less than in this room, and I couldn't find my voice. I was so afraid. But through recovery, learning about myself and helping myself grow and becoming a new person entirely, not the person that I was before, because that wasn't a great person, you know? I'm a totally new person, and learning that by self-promoting, I think I understand the question, by promoting the change that I have made in my life, I'm helping other people.
Yes.
And it's a disservice. Thank you. It's a disservice when I don't do that. And so that's my motivation and my drive to self-promote, but really promote recovery for me in my life. It's not about me, it's about God, and it's about everybody else.
Yes.
So that's where I stand on that.
Thank you, Ashley. Luisana?
Thank you. I think with me, I tend to self-promote more outside of work than in the workplace. I'm super excited to talk about people in the community that may know me about the work that I do. I'm super excited to talk to my friends about the work that I do. I'm super excited to talk to my family about the work that I do. But in the workplace, I'm super intimidated. I'll go to conferences where in the field of education, you see a lot of teachers that are females, but then when you look at administration, it's a lot of males. And so I'll go, and it's just all males, and then there's like a handful of women. So then I'm quiet. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't say anything. Maybe my answer wouldn't be smart enough. Maybe I'm not good enough to be here, and I just got lucky. Because I look around me and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll just sit back and listen instead of say something and speak and give my opinion. And so I'm working on that now, but it's definitely something I've noticed, and I know you. I overheard you earlier saying that you kind of experienced the same thing, where there are more males in your role. So that's kind of what I lived through.
Thank you. And Chris, do you want to chime in on this? It was about self-promotion, and is it something that we're socialized to be that way, if that's the case, that women struggle with self-promotion?
Yeah, I mean, I think women are socialized to be nurturers, right? And so the nature of that means taking care of others. And so if others are supposed to come before us, then certainly we're always nurturing someone else's promotion, probably before our own. It's interesting how, when I was coming here tonight, I was thinking about, I'm very gender nonconforming. I've always identified as a woman, but now that, the trans community is so much bigger in our country, as gender identities have become more broadly understood. I've never identified as transgender, but I've always identified as female, but I'm also like, oh, wow, these young people have all these brilliant terms. Man, maybe I'm more gender fluid. I don't identify as a man. I don't want to go by male pronouns, but these young people got things figured out. Cool. Yes, I've always wanted to dress like a boy, but I've always been super sensitive and I cry a lot. It's always been interesting how my female identity, which I was never confused about, but because I always look like this, others were confused about. Oftentimes, my female identity was always in relationship to being able to do anything a man could do. I felt really, and I'm sure many of you can relate to that in your own way, I was always very fixated. I can remember at 6 when I think someone had said, what do you want to grow up to be? My immediate responses were, I wanted to be a paper boy, because it was called a paper boy, and I thought girls couldn't deliver papers, and I was like, I can deliver papers, please. Which I understand is a hard early morning job. But at the time, I just thought, I can do that. I wanted to be a taxi driver, because I thought there weren't female taxi drivers. And then I wanted to break dance. I didn't see a whole lot of girls do that either, and that seemed amazing. None of which I became, but it always my identity was always in relationship to what can I, so there was there was a way in which I lived that was trying to promote I can do that. If a man can do that, I can do that. And yet then when I have been successful, has that meant that I've always done a good job promoting myself? Not necessarily. So I think socialized, definitely.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I said it I think I said it when I stood here, but I mean it deeper now because I hadn't heard any of your stories. I am honored to be standing here with you guys. Thank you for being here. Which leads to, well, actually, I think it'd be interesting to hear your ages, if you don't mind, because as you say, when I was, or, it makes sense within the context. So if you wouldn't mind, if we can start with Luisana?
Sure, I'm 24.
Thank you.
I'm
Ashley?
25.
Lee?
I'm 61.
And Chris?
38.
Thank you. And I also want to remind you, well, just let you know that at the end, I have a question that says, is there anything else is there anything we're leaving out that needs to be addressed? So as we go through all of the questions and conversations, yeah, you say what happened to this, Mirna? Please, let's save that or even interrupt, at some point. But the next question, you were asked to be on this panel because someone recognized your power. Are there ways in which you believe that your abilities and strengths are challenged because you are a woman? And I think right there, that first sentence I saw, and someone wanted to know the questions before, and I read that, and there was my power, So yeah, take that, accept it. Someone recognized your power. And I see why now that I hear you speak. So, someone recognized your power. Are there ways in which you believe that your abilities and strengths are challenged because you are a woman? Ashley, it looks like.
No, I don't believe my abilities and strengths. I believe that society might think that. I don't believe that at all. And I'm honored to know that I'm coming into my power now. And for now, that's all I have.
Thank you.
I agree with Ashley. I know I'm more than capable, so it's about just showing everyone else that I'm capable. I love when people come and visit the office and they're like, oh, I'm here to speak with the Success Program Director, or like, you must be the secretary. And I'm like, no, that's me. Like, nice to meet you. So, and so it makes me happy, so.
So first, I'd like to thank Kevin for recognizing my power. And never saying anything, but knowing that it was there. So thank you, Kevin, and inviting me to come here and speak. And next, I guess I want to say that I chose a career that was primarily men. It still is today. So when I look around, there are more women that are coming into that career. However, still not nearly the number that, it's never equal. However, I speak loudly and carry a big stick in the room. I'm very clear about what I have to say, and my line at work that everyone's starting to use now is, let me be clear. And the men at my job come to me and say, can you help me? I have a question. And I noticed that became more and more when I became more and more powerful about what I do, because I've been in this industry for 30 years. And I know more about it. I was there when you were a twinkle. And so, in your mama's eye, it's truly, and I'm there also to support and grow and help the young men and the young women that are coming up into this industry. So, yeah, there was time when I felt kind of, oh man, I gotta get around these guys. It was all men. And now I just look at them and I go, just a bunch of old men in the room that need to retire. But we laugh about that, but at the same time, it was a man's world. And as a young woman coming into that man's world, it was tough. However, I had to get tough. And then I had to show them that I had something to offer. And so when that turnaround came, then I, coined my line, let me be clear. So that gave me my strength.
I like that.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, listening to you talk, Lee, I realized like so many of the ways in which like I've never had to experience certain things based on like being born in 1980. Like I just didn't I had sports teams at my school. My mother-in-law loves soccer and is 73 and talks about how desperately she wanted to play soccer growing up, but like girls couldn't play soccer. And it's just always it's a useful reminder. Like I grew up as a little kid playing soccer, and she just didn't have that option. And I've never worked in a male-dominated space, a male-dominated field, and so I've never experienced some of, I'm sure, the innumerable stories you have of ways in which like your power has been undermined. I also think it's interesting, even like sharing, like you all are a little bit younger than me, but you probably have also experienced depression being younger and older that I haven't, based on how I look. Like because I have a more masculine gender expression, I don't get objectified in some of the ways. Like I'm sort of safe from some of like the violence women experience in objectification. And possibly like, I don't know if my intelligence is more respected. I don't know, but like that could be possible too. But I definitely don't, walking down the street, get the same hollers and whistles, and I'm safer. What I experience more, and being in a female-dominated organization for so many years, was internalized sexism, the way women compete with other women and try and bring each other down in ways that doesn't serve us. And so that has been something that I don't even know if I'd say like I've experienced and I've watched happen to colleagues, a lot of different colleagues. So.
Wow.
I'm the moderator, so I'm not supposed to be answering the questions, right? But I feel compelled here because I have been challenged. And a simple way a colleague recently, within months, said, trying to not give away, so like in a position to, standing a position in a certain something, but long-term, I was told, well, that's just because you're being silly or something like that. And to me, I think that if I were a male, it would have been easier for the individual to say like, oh, could you share your perspective with me, or I disagree with your perspective, but I'm just being silly, oh, silly me, And it also makes me think of two other quick little points. Being Luisana, you mentioned the assumption that you must be the secretary. I'm the past chair of the Board of Education in New London, and I am going to tours in some schools with a group of other people. At the head of the line, somebody just skipped over to me and assumed that a male counterpart was the chair. Just the assumption, like how could it be me? And also recently in debates, recognizing that during the debate, I wanted to make sure that, and I don't have a really high-pitched voice, but I wanted to make sure that it was a little bit deeper for the debates, that you're going to take me seriously, So yeah, I do believe there's a challenge there. Thank you. Here's a simple one. What public figure, a woman public figure, do you think first impacted you? How and why? I'm getting warm, if you don't mind.
Oh, I'll start.
Luisana?
I think while there have been amazing women throughout history that have done so much for us, I think the person that's impacted me the most is the one I call when I'm having a bad day, the one that's sitting at home right now and gave birth to me. And that might be a theme tonight. But while I recognize all the amazing women, the one that I recognize the most and admire the most is my mother.
Ashley?
Oh man, public figure. I'm gonna go along a similar theme, but I'm gonna say my grandmother, on my father's side, and that's for many, many reasons. But I could also call her mom. She's been more of a mom to me than I've ever known, and so in a lot of ways, I feel she has saved my life. She's taught me everything I know about morals and work ethic and just about everything. And she continues to every day. Publicly, I don't know, many of you might not know her, but Tammy De La Cruz, she was public when I first got to know her. I knew Joey before that, and I met her after she was already public. But seeing everything she was doing in the community, seeing a woman dedicate her entire life to helping other people, and then continuing to do it after losing her own child. I've never seen or met a more courageous and brave and heartfelt person in my life, and she is absolutely always going to be an icon or someone I look up to and someone I lean on. She's a rock in my life today. She is also like another mother to me now. And yeah, I will forever look up to her and my grandmother.
So same theme. My mother was and will always be the person who I long to live up to. She was a single parent with 4 children. She put herself through college at the age, I won't even say what her age was, but I will say that she walked across the stage to get her diploma behind my brother. And he handed her her diploma. She went on to receive a master's degree and began writing her thesis for her doctorate in her 60s. Because her life was dedicated to raising her children, she worked tirelessly, going to school part-time for 20 years. That for me was the example that I didn't even know I had. So you grow up in the family and you're doing your thing and you're going here and there, but then there's this person that's doing her thing and showing you the way without even telling you the way. And you don't even know it until you're there. And then when you get there, you're like, I'm my mother. You know, praise God. I'm my mother, you know, and how did that happen? She was the person I admired the most, and I didn't realize it. I lost her 2 years ago, and the day I lost her, I said to my cousin, what an honor to have that person in my life. What a joy. What an honor. And I now have the torch. And I carry the torch, and I need to pass that on to my daughter. And I don't even know how I'm doing it except for being her. So this is, you know, that's the person that I would say, you know, for me, she was my public figure. There are a lot of wonderful women, you know, that have helped me throughout my life and have been there for me when I needed them the most. But I didn't realize until I got there that my mother, she said something to me, and I'll tell you this. It was, I think I was living out in California, didn't want to be there, scared, had a young child. I called my mother on Thanksgiving Day. I want to come home. I don't like it here. I don't have any friends. I don't have, you know, I had nothing. And my uncle said, we'll buy you a ticket. You can come home next week. I was so happy. And I got on my phone, my mother, and I said, happy Thanksgiving, you know, Uncle Dick's buying me a ticket, I'm coming home. She says, you're not coming home, honey. You sink or swim. You made your choice, you sink or swim. And I'll tell you, I was upset, but that was the best thing. She gave me a gift, and that gift was suck it up, buttercup, and become something. And I was so mad at her that I became something. So it was her. That is the person. And I'm sorry I'm long-winded. Go ahead. It's your turn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When you said public figure, I was like, who other than my mom? And the first woman who popped in my head, who I spent a lot of time with growing up at 4 p.m., I think it was 4 p.m., was Oprah would come on.
That's mine.
And like, so I spent a lot of, and it was like, you know, in some ways, some of the content was probably a little adult for my age sometimes, but parents were always home. And I just remember, like, she asked tough questions. She covered, like, amazing topics, but she was caring and compassionate. And so public figure-wise, she would be definitely one of my early ones. But yeah, my mom, she had high expectations, and she's like, looks cute and sweet on the outside, but is like a rebel rouser on the inside. Yeah. And I think she never used the word like feminist or you know, social justice. She never used any of those words to self-identify growing up, but I think she is the reason like I care about she showed me what it means to fight for people early on.
Awesome.
Thank you. So we have only covered less than a third of the questions so far, and I realized that I did a moderator faux pas that I didn't inquire as to how much longer we were going. Okay, thank you. The next question, Lee and Chris, you did talk a little bit about, but feel free to jump in. And it's not a direct question, but the intersection of gender with whether it be race or class or any other of those categories that we stand in. If anyone wants to address anything having to do with that, because it's not really just about our experiences as women, but it may be different for me as a Latina woman and how the Latina part impacts what even woman means.
Yeah, I found for me it was growing up not knowing where I belonged. It wasn't quite white enough, and it wasn't quite black enough. And I didn't speak a certain way, and I didn't act a certain way. So I never knew where I fit. And it took a long time for me to say, I just fit wherever I want. And if you don't like it, that's too bad. This is who I am. And it took many, many years to get there. I had a woman ask me one day, just recently, and I gave her such a look, she didn't even know what to make of it, because I looked at her like she had lost her mind. And I came into work and she said, you ever wear your hair natural? And I looked at her and I touched my hair to make sure that it was still there. And I said, what do you mean? You know, like big and natural. And I said, what makes you think this isn't natural? I needed to try to understand where that came from. And she said, oh, I didn't mean that. And at first I started to say, you mean gray? Like the gray that's really there, it disappears? But I felt like, geez, it's 2019. Are you seriously asking me this? Because I dealt with that. Years of dealing with that. Well, you speak too proper, you look too this, or you don't dress the right way. And for a young person, you accept that as it, you're supposed to accept it. But as you break through that and you come through that, I don't accept that anymore. I'm a human being with a brain and a face, and thank God, 2 hands, 2 arms, and I'm not accepting that I'm not good enough for anywhere. I could be everywhere and be where I want to be. So
Thank you.
That's where it's at.
Ashley?
Can I use age? Does
Yes.
that-
Please.
Okay.
It's your choice.
Okay, how do I want to word
good
this? Yeah, you probably deal with this too. I had a job, a summer job, and I worked in a kitchen, and I was a server / prep cook, and I had to wear the kitchen black pants that are typically baggy. You see a chef wearing the baggier black pants, that's what I was wearing, and I wore a white button up, all the way up, long sleeve shirt, and an apron over that. And this was at a place where men are housed, and there were a couple instances that happened, and one of the bigger ones, my last straw, was a man following me out to my car on my break and leaning in to kiss my neck. And kissed my neck, and let me tell you, I gave no inclination of this being okay. And my reaction was, what makes you think that I want that? And he was stunned and stood in my car door, and I told him to move, and I shut my door. And I thought, okay, now I have to go to a higher up, because I still have it in my head not to snitch sometimes. And before that, I was getting messages from another man who lived there about the way I put my chapstick on, okay, and how it was, sexualized by him, basically. So I went to my higher up, and this is where the age comes in. That's the gender part. My higher up was a woman in her late 50s, That was my boss, and the HR woman was probably a couple years older than that, also a woman. And I sat down and I gave them the play-by-play of what happened in both scenarios. In word verbatim, what was told to me was, well, as a young, pretty woman, you should expect men to act that way. And then it was, well, maybe you should wear, different clothes, or like don't wear makeup, or wear your hair messier, from a woman. And I sat there, and what went through my head is, I'm gonna go home and wait till my best friend hears about this. And I was gonna not say anything. I'm in the room with older women, my superiors, and I stopped that thought process, and all I said to both of these women was, I will never accept that answer. Yeah. And then I quit. So age, I just don't know, but I would like to believe if it was an older woman that was treated that way by an older man that lived there, would these two women have said those things to her?
Right.
I'm not too sure about that. So age is definitely a lack of respect or something, I don't know what it is, but.
Thank you, Ashley. Luisana, do you have something to add to this question?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, it's just that thinking about the intersection of gender with either race or class or ethnicity, any of these other categories that we stand in, that it helps inform what we've been taught or what we believe that our gender, what it needs to be.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about, I think I'll go with race. And I say that because for the longest time, living in New York City and then moving to New London, I was blessed to be around a lot of diversity, but that still didn't mean that sometimes I didn't feel ashamed for my parents being in the situation that they were, being immigrant parents. It wasn't always an option to think about college because I wouldn't qualify. It wasn't always an option it was kind of like, okay, what are you going to do after high school? Are you going to go to work, or are you going to help support the family? And so for the longest time, I was kind of embarrassed to share that story, or I was scared that in middle school something was going to happen to my parents, or the way I saw some of my friends, their parents being taken away, or things like that. So, and thankfully they don't have to face any of the repercussions today, but during that time I kind of hid that, like, my family came from where they came from. I was like, oh yeah, they were born here, or their parents are immigrants, but not my parents. And so now even saying that out loud is like, I'm like ashamed to have thought like that or felt like that, but I kind of had no choice, because when in school they're teaching you about the things that can happen, or you're watching it on the news, or you see it on social media, then you're like, well, that could be me. And so that's what I dealt with then. And then obviously age all the time, being in a supervisor position. This isn't my first one. At 17, I was a floor supervisor at a mall job, and didn't feel respected by like anyone there, pretty much, and that's why I left the job, and then they went bankrupt, so. So, whatever to them. But it was little things. It was like, you have someone that's older than me that I'm supposed to be their supervisor, and then they'd ask everybody else, like, oh, do you want me to get lunch for you? But then not ask me. And like, that's not a big deal, but you notice those things, and they're little jabs, and I quit. But it's because of experiences like that I've made it to where I am today, and that I'm as strong as I am today, and I kind of thank them. So.
Thank you. Here's my last one. In relation to the Me Too movement, there's a quote of someone saying, "I'm extremely concerned that there may be unintended consequences." And Seller says, And then it's consistent with, this is no longer part of the quote, but it's consistent with Pew Research Center survey released in April that found 20% of respondents believe that the increased awareness of sexual harassment may lead to fewer opportunities for women. Anyone have a counter to that? Or, I mean, if you did agree, but if anyone have anything to respond to that, the people who are concerned about the repercussions of the Me Too movement because they believe that there'll be less opportunities for women because people will be afraid to hire women because there's the fear of people getting called out. And
I have a question.
I'm confused.
About that question.
yes, does anyone want to counter that?
Who were the people that have the issue?
Well, I mean, it's a
Does-
Pew Research, so it's 20% of the respondents. I don't.
Or 20% of the men?
20. I
So
don't know how.
do you know
yeah.
what I mean? Because,
But regardless, I mean, what's your response to that?
I don't think that
I'd assure you that
Anyone
some women would too, believe that.
would be afraid that something may happen, it may hurt women to be part of the Me Too movement?
That people are going to be afraid to hire women.
Well, then they have issues within their company. That's
That's
my
right.
response to that. They've got issues. Because if they're afraid to hire women because of that, then they need to look inside their company and find out what's wrong in here. And if there's no issues, they won't be afraid to hire women. That's my
That's a good one.
response.
That's right.
I agree.
I agree. Yep.
Okay. Anything else? Any other that we're leaving out that you think needs to be addressed? Again, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.